Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced and welcome to another video where we're going to be talking about Python. Now in this video, what I want to do is introduce the idea of loops and iteration. So what we're going to do is create a new Python file. So I'm going to create a new Python file or a new interactive Python notebook. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about loops and iteration. Okay, and basically the idea is just basically doing things through repetitive steps. Okay, so basically repetition. Now there's two ways we can kind of approach this. Okay, the first in Python there is the while loop. And the way the while loop works is that while the condition is true, the code block repeats. Okay, so let's give you an example. Let's pretend we have a number here. We'll call it the counter, and we'll say that the counter equals 0. Okay, and I'd like to repeat 10 times. Okay, so in that case, what I'm going to do is I'll say while the counter is less than or equals 0. Oh, no parentheses. Well, yeah, we can have a parentheses. Okay, then I want to do something. And again, whenever we're going to designate a code block as part of an expression, we have to use the colon. Okay, so the colon is basically saying, hey, the following code belongs to the while block, and that code is indented. So in that case, I can say, hey, this code here belongs to the while block, and what I want to do is print the counter. Now let me just fix this over here. That should be counter. Okay, so now on each loop is going to print the counter. Now if I do this now, it's just going to loop forever. Why? Because counter is always going to be 0. So in order for this loop to eventually stop, that counter needs to be greater than or equal, and actually I want to do this as 10. Okay, has to eventually be greater than 10. And actually, let me just do this as less than. So as long as the counter is less than 10, this is going to keep repeating. So that variable has to get up to 10. Right now, it's not. Right now, nothing is changing it. Okay, I'm just going to be printing it over and over again into eternity. So what I need to do in my loop is I need to increment my counter. Now in other languages, you'd be able to do this. Counter plus plus. Use what's called the increment operator, which adds 1. This is not available in Python for good reason. It's better to not use that. Okay, for a variety of reasons that really don't matter at this point. Usually, you can do something like this. You could do equals counter plus 1. Just say, hey, it equals itself plus 1. Now this works, but you see writing counter twice is repetitive, and generally in programming we want to avoid the amount that we repeat ourselves. Okay, it's a whole principle that's called dry. Don't repeat yourself. So one way we can improve this is we can use a compound assignment operator. What does that mean? It means it allows me to assign a new value to the variable as a mathematical result to itself. So basically I'm going to do some sort of mathematical operation to the value and then reassign the variable. So in this case, I'm doing plus equals, which essentially does the same thing as saying counter equals counter plus 1. Okay, so in this case, what I do is I just run this now and see we loop 10 times. So you see in the first loop, counter equals 0, and then we print counter, and then we add 1 to it, so then it's 1, and then the next loop it prints 1. It keeps doing that until it gets to 10, and on 10, counter is no longer less than 10, it's equal, so it stops looping. Okay, so that's your basic while loop. That's your basic loop that you can use for pretty much anything in Python. Python gives you another choice though. You can loop through any iterable object using a for loop. Okay, so probably the most typical iterable object is a list. Okay, so let's see here. Let's create a list. So we'll say my list equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now if I want to loop over that, I can say for num, because you can give it any variable name you want. I'm going to use num because the things in the list are numbers. So it makes sense. For every num in my list, and then I give it a code block. Okay, so I'm saying, hey, for each thing in the list, and I give a variable for each thing, and then what I want to do is print num. And what this is going to do is that as it loops, num is going to equal 1 on the first loop, 2 on the second loop, 3 on the third loop. So then if I run this, okay, I get that. Okay, so that works great, and that can work on any kind of iterable. So again, I could do it pretty much with anything. So let's try this again, like for num in a tuple. Okay, so let's do a tuple of 1, 2, 3, and do the same thing. Okay, print num. Okay, and let's see how that works. And it prints out 1, 2, 3. Now let's see if I can iterate over a set. This one I'm not as sure about, but let's try it out. For num in a set of 1, 2, 3. Okay. And let's print num. Let's see here. Can I iterate over a set? I want to say yes, but let's find out. I can. Okay, so sets are also iterable. Okay. And then how about a dictionary? Like a dictionary is a little bit weird because it's key value pairs. So let's see here. So if I say for num, or let's say for k, and you'll see why I do k in a second, for k in, oops, for k in name, Alex Merced, and age, 38, okay, let's print k. Let's see what k is. Print k. Okay, awesome. Okay. Print k. Okay, so if I run that, notice that when you use this for in loop over a dictionary, what it's going to do, it's going to iterate over the keys. Okay, which is fine. So we could work with that. We could say, hey, k. So that means I could just do something like loop for, well, I don't have a name for that dictionary. So let's actually do this. K. I'm going to cut this out. And then before this, we'll actually assign the dictionary to a variable. Say my dictionary equals this. And then here we'll do my dictionary. And then what I could do is I could say, hey, I could use that k, that key, and say my dictionary, pass it the square brackets, and pass the key as the key there in the square brackets, and then it'll print the right thing on each loop. So you see Alex Merced 38. And that works. But what if you want both the key and the value? What if you, for some reason, wanted to say something like, actually, we'll show you. Okay, what I could have also done instead is I could say for, I think it's kv in my dictionary. And dictionaries have a function called items. Okay, and what this is going to do is going to return a tuple of keys and values. Okay, so then when I do kv, it'll actually take that tuple and assign the first value in the tuple to k and the second value of the tuple to v, key value. Okay, and just to show you what I mean, let's do this. Let me actually just give me another line here, and let's print my dict.item, so you can see what the result of that function is. Okay, and then what I want to do in the loop, oops, let's enter there for our code block, and then print. Let's do an f string and say, hey, my key equals value. And actually that should be v because it's kv. Okay, so let's see what that equals. Okay, oh, forgot the closing parenthesis there. Okay, so again, the error tells you what's wrong. It's like saying, hey, you're missing something here. So always read the errors. Okay. Oh, it's items. My bad. Items. Let's try that again. And there we go. So you see here, what you get back when you do dict.items, instead you get back an array of tuples. So what you're doing is you're looping over the array of tuples, and that's where you're able to do this. Okay. Which is pretty useful, okay, to know that you can do that when you have tuples. Okay, so keep in mind that it's not just here you can do that with, it's just with any array of tuples. So for example, if I had an array of tuples like this, so we'll say a list of tuples. So we'll call this a list of tuples, so list of top equals, and we'll say first we have an array, a tuple of 1, 2, 3. Okay, then we have a tuple of 4, 5, 6, And then we have a tuple of 7, 8, 9. Okay, now if I loop over this, so if I say 4, now I have 3 values in each tuple, so I could actually do x-y-z as an example in list tup, and this should work. And I can now print x, y, z. Okay, and it works. Okay, so just keep in mind that and that's another benefit of having tuples. Basically, if you have a bunch of tuples all of matching length, I can do patterns like this and take advantage of that for in loop in the way it works, where I can loop over the thing and then, split up its values if it's like a tuple. Okay, but yeah, that's how you loop over things. You'll do this a lot because there's a lot of times where you have to iterate over objects or arrays of objects and things like that. So yeah, so that's looping. Simple as that. So anytime you want to repeat code over and over again, you use a loop. So you just have to ask yourself, and again, if you need to repeat that code for everything in a list, you can use the for in loop, which is something you'll probably do a lot because you might have like a list of students and you may need to maybe uppercase the first letter in each of their names. So then you do a for student and students, and then for each student you uppercase their first name or something like that. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll see you all later.